Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Lethem. Welcome to The Economy and You. And today I have the pleasure of having a special guest, Jay Fidell, the one and only, the venerable, here to help me do my show today. And thank you for stepping in, Jay. You know,
Absolutely.
It's sometimes a little difficult to get a guest for the show.
Maybe you ought to take more showers.
Oh, that hurts. Oh, okay. All right. But I wanted to sort of divert a little bit onto something that I found very interesting when I was doing a little research on the internet. And it sort of started with this idea that the United States has reserve units that are being deployed to places like the Philippines and most especially Mindanao, where we have forward operating bases. And they have been involved in some skirmishes. This is of last February.
Skirmishes with who?
Skirmishes against an organization there that is
Muslim
called
terrorists.
they're called the Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters. That's a mouthful.
They're Muslim terrorists, I think.
Well, yeah, they have their own agenda.
Guerrillas is what
Yes,
they are.
they would be guerrilla fighters. Yes. And I just found it rather interesting because I was chatting with an attorney yesterday who had actually been deployed with them. And so I found it a very interesting thing that I had never heard about. And so from that conversation, I discovered that they have been setting up military installations all over the world. Sometimes they're deployed on ships. And one of the examples, of course, is our giant golf ball that sits out by Pearl Harbor.
Saw it the other day.
Yes. Now, I wonder what use is it if it's in the harbor? I mean, isn't the point of that thing to be sitting out in the ocean somewhere as a deterrent?
Sounds like a great idea. Well, I mean, I can guess what the background is.
Yes.
The background is a short story.
Okay.
I was in the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard, in those days, it had to have little airfields that C-130 supply planes could land on. Had to have them all over the place because it had LORAN station, long-range aid to navigation stations everywhere.
That's right.
And there was a particular airfield in the Philippines near a LORAN station that they needed to have. And they got it after the war, after World War II, and they kept it. But one day, a Filipino neighbor, a farmer who had land adjacent to the, this will take a little while.
Okay.
The airstrip said, you know, I own that airstrip, you guys. You have to pay me for that airstrip, okay? So it was just a small amount of money, and the Coast Guard paid him.
Just
Okay.
to address the issue.
Yeah, no, yeah. It's just we don't want to make trouble.
Uh-huh.
We have good relations with all the people around this airstrip. Okay, they paid him. You know, a week later, another guy comes. This is like when you
another part of the airstrip.
when you put bird feeders in your yard. You know,
Ah.
on day one there's no birds, but in a week or two, all the birds.
That's right.
And so the second guy came, and then the third guy came, and before you know it, there were hundreds of people who said they owned the airstrip and they wanted to be paid.
Uh-huh.
And the Coast Guard at that time gave up the airstrip. They said, this is too hard for us.
Yeah.
We don't want to alienate anybody, but we don't want to pay everybody. So they just dropped the idea, which is really too bad. And so the farmers got it and they used it for farming, which I guess they had a good time on that one. But bottom line is there are all kinds of issues. You know, we know in Okinawa, for example,
Right.
how much trouble you have. I mean, it's a problem waiting to happen to have a base in some places, especially where the population is increasing, you know,
Yes.
and making incursion on your military base.
Well, we have usurped a large amount of the land in Okinawa. It wasn't like we just took a little sliver. We took major swaths of Okinawa and turned that into military bases. That also has affected the culture of Okinawa, you know, because the Okinawans see themselves as being unique, not necessarily Japanese. They consider themselves to be Okinawan. And so, of course, the traditional model for U.S. bases has been large bases, lots of troops, housing, shopping, shopping facilities, all the support facilities that you need in a community.
Yeah, and you remember in the first Iraq War in the early 90s,
Mm-hmm.
how
I do.
Colin Powell built, or whoever the generals were at that time,
Mm-hmm.
they built a huge establishment of military. They had, I don't know, 500,000 troops in the country. They built everything.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a permanent facility there before shot one was fired.
Yes.
And I think that was the old model. and it showed us it doesn't necessarily help.
Well, certainly the other issue is whether it helps or not is we don't have the budget for that anymore.
Touche.
Yes, so that kind of, I would sort of say, armchair military, those days are gone. We've spent that money.
Yeah.
And so now we've had to come up and figure out a new model. You know, we also have some issues with the budgets toward building new aircraft carriers and even supporting the aircraft carriers that we've had. In fact, we had to pull one of the aircraft carriers out of the Suez Canal because it wasn't in the budget to keep it out there. Well, that's problematic. So the military, of course, you know, they're always trying to think of new ways to handle things. And so how do we keep a presence throughout the world and continue to maintain our military superiority and project power into these regions around the world, especially in regions where we have a lot of issues. So the military, General Dempsey came up with the idea. I don't know if he came up with the idea, but he certainly employed the idea of using what we call lily pad bases. So what is a lily pad base?
It's a pop-up.
It's a pop-up, yeah. It's the idea of a lily pad base is that with a frog, you know, hops from lily pad to lily pad, right? So what you're doing is you're building smaller, leaner installations that often have special forces units deployed there. Their mission is a little bit different. They're not necessarily there for the long term, but what they allow us to do is continue to project power into the region, into those regions. You know, we project power around the world. You know, in a time where we talk about reducing the size of our military bases, yeah, we may be reducing in areas where we have the large traditional size bases, but we're creating more of these smaller, leaner installations around the world.
Sounds like a great idea.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's very smart. It does have some drawbacks. When you talk about some of the challenges with these, you know, you could easily overrun these smaller bases. That's one of the challenges, of course.
The trick is not to be there when somebody tries to
try to overrun you, yes.
Disappear. It's almost like guerrilla bases. You know, it's like lily pad, pop up, and then I'm gone. And when you leave, you don't leave anything of value there. You don't leave weapons there. You don't leave munitions there. You take it all with you. And then you come back when you need to come back.
And this is exactly what guerrilla fighters do.
Yes.
So it makes great sense. Also, these things operate on because they run on a leaner budget. Now, I would imagine the quality of life for our soldiers in these environments is not as luxury or as wonderful. Clearly, but you know, we train our soldiers. This is the kind of environment they're trained to work in.
I was, you know, when you were going back to the first Iraq War,
right.
And for that matter, the second Iraq War and Afghanistan. You remember the shots in the video and the news about all the stuff they had there? I mean, everything, right down to recreation.
Barbecue steaks.
Barbecue steaks. It
Yeah.
was like being in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, do we really need to provide that level of comfort? I don't want to, you know, deprecate the life of the trooper, but at the same time, I don't think we ought to establish a little U.S. America town kind of place in every theater of war. It's war.
Yes.
So you don't do that. And I agree. I mean, I think, you know, war these days is really a function of technology, and technology includes transportation. And you get in there with what you need, including soft bedding, if that's what they want.
Yes.
And then you get out of there with what you need.
Well,
and you go exactly where the action is, because the action is always changing.
Well, you know, I think one of the issues, too, the reason that we've gone to this sort of lily pad approach is because terrorists, now you play whack-a-mole with terrorists. They pop up
what
everywhere.
What is that exactly?
Whack-a-mole. You know, the little game where you have the little hammer and you hit them, the little moles pop up and you hit them on the head.
Oh,
you know.
sure. And then he goes underground, comes up somewhere
else. You know, so I think one of the issues too is that with this type of strategy that we're employing today, with this sort of lily pad approach, is that, you know, we can go after terrorists wherever they pop up, and maybe they're doing some damage somewhere or they're doing some recruiting in that area. Right. We can immediately address those issues in a more efficient and more quickly.
It's brilliant. You know, I mean, it goes back to the redcoats and the revolutionaries. You know, the English, one of the reasons, I mean, there were a lot of reasons they lost, but one of the reasons they lost is they were stiff. They weren't being nimble. The revolutionaries were being very nimble, melting into the woods, you know, and you couldn't find them so easy. And really, and take that whole notion forward. the idea of guerrilla warfare, the idea of whack-a-mole warfare. You heard it here on
Yeah,
ThinkTech.
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, we have needed to do this for a long time. Those mega bases are not the way. We have to have little units who can be coordinated, who can come together when necessary.
That's right.
And you can communicate with them, have them focus on something, and have them disappear. It's kind of an answer to the guerrilla approach to war.
But the other thing is that these little, when you set up a base like this, okay, you've got an airfield, you've got personnel there that are designed to handle logistics issues. You can scale these up very quickly. As needed, you can scale up these little lily pads. And so that also is a benefit. And I think also when you consider that you're also integrating with local military troops in that area, in that country, you're also creating a cohesive fighting force going forward for the United States. In other words, it's just not us taking the brunt of the action. We're collaborating and working, we're building alliances this way.
And then you also are able to establish a better relationship, hopefully, using this approach, because it's not overwhelming, to the local community. It's not, and you don't look like a target, as in my case in the Philippines, in the 60s. Mm-hmm. You can come and go, and of course, you've got to use good social skills as part of this. But that's the modern American U.S. force. They learning social skills. They certainly demonstrate that to some extent, anyway, in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Well, I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, and Marines were not known for their social skills. They were known for their drinking skills.
Far and wide.
Yes, that's right. Social skills, not so much.
But if you're going to use this as a way to create alliances.
Yes.
And a way not to offend the local community, you've got to have a sort of, a whole landscape of tools. And one of them would be, we don't damage your infrastructure. We don't rape your women. We avoid that at all costs. And we try to be nice to you. And when it's time for us to go, we go without leaving a mess.
That's right.
And all of that helps for, what do you want to call it? It's the soft side, the side of hard power. That's what it is.
Well, one of the things that makes America a powerful nation is that we can project in two very important ways. We project power through our military, but also economically. But if we just try to do it economically, we leave ourselves with a lot of challenges. Putin has just handed over a bunch of new military artillery equipment to al-Assad. Okay, so
that's so tacky.
That's just tacky, isn't it? Well, and the thing is that now that he's done that, we fly sorties in the area. Maybe we do 10 or 15 missions a day. Now, we could do a lot more. And one of the challenges for us is to ensure that people respect that we were projecting our power. Now, if we take a half-hearted approach to these things, it doesn't work out well for us because they're just going, look at the Americans. They're not really committed to helping us. They're sort of kind of helping us. But one of the things that we're doing with these lily pad bases is because we're feet on the ground working with the local military, we can show them that we're really committed to their success. And if all we're doing is we're dropping some bombs from the air, and we're not even doing that much of it, then it looks like we're not really committed to supporting our allies. And we're not necessarily committed, it doesn't look like committed to supporting Iraq.
It reminds me of the whole issue about boots on the ground going into Syria way back a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Can we afford to put boots on the ground? The notion was we can't really have an effect there unless we do that. But if we do that, it's very politically unpopular back home, boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. Well, when they talk about boots on the ground, they're talking about a lot of boots.
They're talking about a lot of boots.
A big force,
yes.
Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops in this big, I described before, this big pre-Iraq One kind of gathering. The gathering on one side of the battlefield. That's really old-fashioned.
It's old-fashioned.
If I could give you just a lily pad, and you could come and go at will, you could make the same impression, have boots on the ground, but only a few boots on the ground, and avoid, the problem back home.
Yes, and I want to talk about why the other reasons that's important. We're going to go to commercial. I'm Chris Lethem. This is The Economy and You with Jay Fidell, and we'll be right back. Mahalo.
Hi, my name is Cindy Matsuki, and I host High Growth with HTDC, where we talk about all things tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing, because there are tons of things that are happening in Hawaii in those fields, and we like to share them with you because more people should know about them. The show broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 3 o'clock on ThinkTech Hawaii, and tune in, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Chris Lethem, and welcome back to The Economy and You. I'm talking with Jay Fidell today. We're talking about lily pads. And what are lily pads? Lily pads are a sort of a new approach to deploying U.S. troops in other sectors of the world to help us project power throughout our globe. And we were talking about how with the lily pads, one of the things that's quite interesting now, the dynamic of this, is that because we're deploying with allied troops, they are now taking ownership, especially in Anbar province in Iraq. They're now taking ownership of their military. They're taking ownership of the fight. I think this is a great imperative, Jay. I really believe this is going to help us not only solidify our relationships long term with these folks, but it's going to give them the skin in the game which they need and take ownership over the battlefield.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, it's a new kind of war there. And ISIS doesn't, they're not stupid. You can't say, and the problem is that we could have this working,
yes,
and it looks good in the face of, say, what's happened over the past few years since we diminished our forces, it hasn't been really good.
Mm-hmm.
So this may be better, but ISIS is not unaware of lily pads. They're probably watching this show. Right? Don't you do anything.
Yes, hi,
we're not on your side.
Yes.
So, but if they know what we're doing, they're going to figure out a counter strategy. So I guess I would add this to your thought.
Okay.
We haven't really seen proof yet in any significant scale. I mean, we didn't hear about this until recently. Mm-hmm. That lily pads, were in effect and were working. We haven't seen that they win the day. We haven't seen that the Iraqis really follow us when we try to lead them from a lily pad. We haven't seen that we can't be overrun from a lily pad.
Well, here's the thing, Jay. One of the things I would add to that argument.
My point is that it's like a chess game. It's like an escalation. So they have their guerrilla way of fighting. Mm-hmm. We have our new guerrilla way of fighting. They find a countermeasure. It's like cyber war, yeah?
Oh, sure.
They find a countermeasure. Then it's up to us to refine our lily pad model to beat their countermeasure. That's what this is about, Chris.
Well, I agree with you. I think, you're always going to have that tete-a-tete. But, we're talking about a region that has millions of people. They have millions of young people, which means they also have millions of young men that they could employ on the battlefield if they really wanted to take ISIS out. If there was a real desire to put these people under their thumb and get rid of them, they have the wherewithal to do it. I don't know that they have the political will to do it, but certainly they have the manpower to employ people. ISIS really only represents 40 or 50,000 troops. They're not that large.
It reminds me of a truism that we've seen emerging in our lifetime. It was, who was it? It was Lyndon Johnson had a little picture of his office.
That's not my lifetime. Okay.
Lyndon Johnson, when you've got them by the mm-hmm. their hearts and minds will follow.
That's right.
He had a little picture and it was all over the place. I knew a lawyer here downtown had one of those pictures in his office. When you've got them by the their hearts and minds will follow. And that's true, except that what my point was. What was your point a minute ago?
Well, I think the point was is that they've got millions of troops available, people are available, or young men
Oh, yeah.
available.
So
to bring
you've
into the
got to
battlefield.
change the way those millions of people think.
Yes.
You've got to change their approach to everything, their self-image, the image of the country, their image as a community together. This is not easy. And, you know, I would give you this thought. Again, what we've learned in our lifetimes. Vietnam, a perfect example of people who really hated us there, a lot of them. You know, you couldn't find anybody who was loyal and faithful to the U.S. You never knew for sure. So it was a very dangerous business. But if you leave, you know, but while you're there, you show them the American dream.
Yes.
They made Miss Saigon about this notion.
Yes.
You show them the American dream. You show them life in California, life in Southern California, and they begin to get the idea there's a good out there. There's a greater thing they can do, and maybe they should be friendly. Maybe they should find a way to get together and do what we do. You emulate the West to emulate the U.S.
Yeah.
And over our lifetimes, I don't know when you were born, but over our lifetimes, I think that's happened in Vietnam. I mean, theoretically, they still have a Politburo and all that, but the reality is they're capitalist.
Their economic system is deeply capitalist.
Deeply capitalist, and,
Yes.
and they're doing well. They know how to attract capital from everywhere. They know how to make it work.
Well, they're hardworking people.
Yes,
And
but
they got a great work ethic.
They learned the style of it. They
Yes.
learned how to, you know,
Uh-huh.
get global from us.
Mm-hmm.
So take the Middle East now. The Middle East didn't get global. It isn't global yet. I mean, it's very tribal. It's very locked in religion. It dumps on women.
Yes.
You know, it's a society that is really hard to get anything done. So the question is whether, when we are there, we give them this view of the U.S., this view of the West that may change the way they think.
Well, it may, but I think one of the
Over
differences...
time, I think it will.
Over the time, but here's one of the differences between Vietnam and the Arab states. The Arab states are awash in money. They're awash in capital from oil. They don't need to change because they got money. They've got the things that they want. They've got their color TV set, their nice car, their nice home, and all that stuff. So there has been no real need for them to transition to Western-style capitalist social structure, economic structure. Women are going to continue to be undermined in terms of being able to have power and authority and independence until such a time that it creates an advantage. At this point, there's no advantage gained in doing that, especially for those that are already in power. So until they run out of money and are trying to figure it out and have to figure out how to do things differently, I don't perceive that there's going to be change anytime soon. I think therein lies the difference. Now, the Vietnamese have had to, after the war, they had to figure out how to build wealth. In that desire to build wealth, they realized they had to go look for a different model than what was his, Ho Chi Minh? The Ho Chi Minh model. They had to go find a different model. Well, the model that's available to them by all their neighbors is a capitalist model. And so they conformed to capitalism, maybe some people kicking and screaming, but they conformed because they saw the innate advantage to that model over a socialist model. I'm a little bit concerned that our Arab neighbors... You can make a
lot of
yes.
differentials between the Middle East and...
yes.
But I agree with you, they're very different. But I don't think we can ignore the fact that they have not had influence from us until now, until war. They have not, seen the American model at all. And now they've seen it. Now, it's not going to be right away.
Right.
And it's not going to certainly be with ISIS, because those guys are pointed in their direction only. But maybe the community in general will change. One of the wild cards is it seems to me that the liberal people, the middle class people, the ordinary folk, the ones who could see this change, they're leaving town. They're leaving town and they're leaving the rest behind.
Yes.
This probably changes the formula and the timing of sort of the westernization of the Middle East. So I'm sorry to see that, because if they stayed back, I think would be a better prospect for the future, actually.
Well, those people who are the business people, who are the people with a hardworking ethic, a lot of them have stayed. But now it's gotten to the point, especially in the Syrian conflict Iran, hotspots, Yemen, places like this. They leave, so they're leaving and taking their families to greener pastures. We now have of course, an immigration crisis going on from North Africa, where all these people are moving into Western and Eastern Europe, and it's not small numbers. This is just massive movement of people. So that is going to be interesting, because now that they're moving into those areas, they're going to learn Western culture.
Yeah.
Now, after the war is over,
My guess is this wave of migrants
yes,
is probably going to be more nutritious than the migrants who are already in Europe, because they'll want to, they tell you they want to be productive. They want to get into the society and rise up in it.
Yes, yes.
I think a lot of people who are from the Middle East who are there now don't necessarily feel that way.
Well, one of the challenges is assimilation, and we're sort of getting off into a side topic here, but assimilation is one of the challenges. Now, we assimilate people very well in the United States. France has probably done the worst job of assimilation of any other country when it comes to the North Africans and Arabs. They tend to stay in their own communities, and they're not integrating with the French. They're not learning the language. They're not assimilating culturally, and of course this has created a lot of problems for the government of France. Now, the story is out on Germany. Germany has a sort of a neo-Nazi component to it, but I would think that these folks are going to probably assimilate better, as you say. I think Germany will do a better job, and I think there is a realization
Germany has
that they
been
need
very
to be
kind
doing.
in this migrant deal.
They have opened the gates.
Angela Merkel has been really sweet, really nice.
Yes.
Opened the gates, and I remember, I don't know if I told you this, but I remember hearing on NPR that there's a program in Germany where you have foster parents who get paid to bring homeless people, migrant people into their homes. And they take care of them as family. These are Arabs.
Wow.
They take care of them as family at home. And it's a win-win, because the older people like to have the younger people around. The younger people love to be, they need to be taken care of. They need to have a home. And it works really swell. Now, I don't know if there are millions of these families, but at least there's programs to that effect. Germany has been very humanitarian over the past few months.
They've also, they're bringing in 500,000 people a year. We're bringing in 20,000.
Right.
So that also is a different
It's
differential
going to have
as
a
well.
different effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. When we come back, I
back
want
to the
talk-
lily pads.
Well, okay.
Right.
We're running out of, we have to go to a commercial break?
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll come back, talk about the lily pads. And I also want to talk a little bit about a conflict of interest for Hawaii's judiciary.
Wow. What a show.
So,
You would never have expected such a
that's
thing.
a thing out of left field. I'm Chris Lethem, and this is The Economy and You, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Roy Cordani, and every Wednesday at 1 p.m., I host Life in the Law, which is a segment of ThinkTech Hawaii. And basically, I host guests who have some relevancy to law in Hawaii. And I hope you will continue to tune in. If you have questions, tweet us at ThinkTech Hawaii. Mahalo.
Aloha, I'm Carlos Juarez, host of Global Connections, and I want to invite you to come join us. We cover a range of global issues. We bring a lot of expert opinion, a lot of issues, whether they're contemporary events happening in the world or maybe looking at things from a more historical perspective. Global issues.
Aloha, this is Alice V. Hagan from ThinkTech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show is a bi-weekly show on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. We invite interesting people, entrepreneurs, fascinating leaders who contribute to the social economic well-being of our state. Please tune in to my show, Business Education Spotlight, ThinkTech Hawaii, bi-weekly, Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Miley Scarpino, and I'm the host of the Empower Hour. If you're interested in health, nutrition, fitness, here on the island of Oahu, want to learn more about places to train at or different trainers available, then watch my show on Fridays at 3. We have a great time, and I hope that you'll come join us. Much aloha. Now go get swole.
Hi, my name is Stan Osserman, and I host the show every Friday here on ThinkTech Hawaii called Stan the Energy Man. We talk about everything energy, from anaerobic digesters to batteries to hydrogen fuel cell and grid power. And we do that to keep you informed on the latest technology that's out there and the things that are going on in Hawaii. We broadcast every Friday from noon until 1 o'clock, and I hope you'll tune in. So sometimes we'll be on ThinkTech, and sometimes we'll be on Olelo Channel 54, and I'd like you to listen in to me and join me every Friday. We'll see you then. Aloha.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to The Economy and You. Today's guest is the Venerable Jay Fidell. We're talking about some of the interesting things in the world of international politics, and we're talking about lily pads. And then I want to talk on one other issue that has to do with something I stumbled upon with the Hawaii judiciary. But you had something that you wanted to talk about regarding lily pads, so I wanted to let you finish your thought.
Well, I mean, I'd only say that I worry that the lily pad arrangement may not work in the long term. You know, we have a kaleidoscopic changing going on in the Middle East, and it seems remarkable to me that Europe takes the brunt of all this defection from the Middle East, all of these migrants, and the U.S. has done very little about it, and so have a lot of Arab countries. They don't want to take any of these migrants.
And that seems quite astonishing to me, that they're unwilling to step up, considering it's, you know, they share a culture and a language. And
I mean, after families living there for thousands of years, all of a sudden picking up and moving, these are not temporary moves. They don't say, I want to go back next year. They don't say that.
No,
they say, I'm leaving forever. I had enough. This is a global change of major magnitude. And, you know, it seems amazing that it could happen, that the West can't stop it. Russia apparently doesn't want to stop it. Russia likes this. And the other Arab countries, they just ignore it.
Well, I think Russia's projection of power is through al-Assad. It's through Iran. It's through al-Assad. It's through Hezbollah. This is how Russia projects power in the region, through these puppet organizations and states.
So the point I would make is this. If what I think is going to happen happens, namely that the good guys leave and the bad guys are in greater control and have a firmer hold on the territory,
right,
then the lily pads aren't going to work. You can't go into territory that's controlled by somebody else and plant a lily pad and expect to live the night. They're going to find you and they're going to do bad things to you. So, you know, the old model may be the only way to deal with a place where nobody likes you.
Well, I think there are soldiers there. I mean, there are troops, and certainly these countries have the ability to apply greater troop forces to the region. And our role, of course, is if we're taking on a role of teaching excellence and teaching strategy, and we're training troops on how to use
and collaboration and
working
together,
environmental model. And these bases are mobile and they're flexible. They can be moved around as needed in locations which allow us to project power and collaborate with our allies. Then they serve the function I think they were intended to serve. But I think...
But the moves aren't established, right? The moves, the technique. We know the idea, we know the general parameters of lily pads, but the internal, you know, workflow, the internal programming on how you handle it or don't, how you make it work, we probably don't have a lot of experience with that. And I think we need to get that experience, and it'll take a little while. It'll take some unfortunate occurrences too. But ultimately, it's the new world. Ultimately, this and a lot of other technology and drones and high telecommunications, that'll be the new world.
Well, the fact that we have the best technology in the world probably gives us an advantage working with smaller structures and smaller base camps. And allows us to deploy more quickly and integrate and being able to have all these different lily pads sort of talk to each other and integrate and deploy.
And act as one.
And act as a force unto itself, but not necessarily giving an advantage to the enemy where they can easily find you or that you're in a static position that you have to defend long term. This way, you may have to defend it in the short term, but the fact that it takes the enemy, it makes it more difficult for them to locate you, identify you as a target. Probably does give us an advantage. I mean, I think in terms of guerrilla warfare tactics, the ability to support and refuel drones in forward positions, and apply other technologies, inherently, I believe, gives us an innate advantage
I
today
agree,
that
I
we
agree.
didn't experience previously.
And that's the revelation here.
Yes.
And thank you for raising it. You know, the way the U.S. does battle, rules of engagement, the rules of occupying a battlefield, it's all changing now.
I think it is.
And we learned, it shows you we learned a few things. We learned about the technology, we learned about the strategies and the tactics in the Middle East. And now, hopefully, this will do better in a difficult environment.
I think so. I think so. So let's talk a little bit about something that I uncovered with our judiciary. And I just wanted to touch on this because I found this it was really forced me to scratch my head. Did you know that when the judiciary makes you pay a fine for a traffic violation, that part of that money, $20 or so of every traffic ticket, goes into a special fund that the judiciary has full discretion over? Now,
What do they use it for?
whatever they want to use it for, they have full
For
discretion.
their
Now,
own purposes, for the
their own
benefit of the
purposes. Now,
judiciary.
it was based on, or justified based on them having to develop a new computer system and develop new software and get all this stuff done, and that was a very expensive proposition. And so there was a negotiated deal made between the legislature and the judiciary that they could siphon off some of that money and put it into their own fund. Well, what's the problem with that, Jay? You're an attorney. What's the problem with that?
Well, it doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good.
You know, it reminds me of getting stopped on a highway in the Deep South.
Which some of us have actually experienced.
Speak for yourself.
I am.
And the justice of the peace, or the small claims judge, whatever, the highway patrolman judge, finds you, and the money belongs to him for his own purposes. And that's not exactly the way we want it to work. But I think what this reflects, it's probably historic, probably goes back a long way, is that the judiciary was unable to get from the general fund the kind of budget they should have gotten. So they crafted this other way to raise money for their own administration. And if we really had the choice, we would have them get a budget out of the general fund, not take it out of the proceeds of tickets. Because then it makes, to the public, it makes it look like they have an
vested interest
in writing tickets.
Yes,
This
yes.
is a little troublesome.
It's a little troublesome, and it violates the concept of due process. And the importance of the judiciary is that they are seen as impartial, and that they are applying the law even-handed. Now, if they're getting a little bit of the change out of every ticket that they rule on and say, okay, you're guilty, you got to pay this fine, what happens to that sense of impartiality? As me as a citizen, I feel betrayed.
I wouldn't mind it so much if it was only the people who pleaded guilty. It's the ones who plead not guilty, or who might plead not guilty.
Yes.
That would be a problem, because then then the judge might be affected by this, knowing that the judiciary is in better shape for every conviction that he hands down.
Somebody's looking at those numbers. Somebody in the judiciary is looking at those numbers.
Judges are not writing the tickets.
They're not writing the tickets, but you know
Judge,
what?
I mean, if it was different, we would go to the patrolman's benevolent fund. That would really be a problem.
That doesn't solve my problem. I don't think I'm any happier with the police officers getting a cut of the action either. So,
well, this goes to the whole process of budgeting in the state. It goes to the whole process of managing the state's finances. And so often we find that the budget is not enough for a given agency. So often we find the legislature is raiding funds that were set aside for other purposes.
That never happens, James.
The classic example is the barrel tax.
Yes.
The idea of the barrel tax at the outset was that the money from the barrel of oil, right?
Right.
The money from the barrel tax would go to develop clean energy. So you tax dirty energy and you give the money for clean energy. It's perfect. It's got a music about it. Except they took the money away.
Yeah.
Only a fraction goes to energy. The rest goes into the general fund.
That's right.
So it's a
Kind of
raid.
like how lotteries work.
It's a raid.
It's a raid.
It's what
That's
it
right.
is.
That's right.
And I mean, I don't understand why the legislature lets this happen, or why the public lets it happen, or why the legal establishment lets it happen.
Well,
why the community doesn't go out and pitchfork. If we pass the bill
Is
to
it just too
encourage clean
complicated?
energy,
Is it just too complicated for the everyday citizen?
I guess so.
Is it just like we're living in our own little bubble and this stuff goes on at the legislature? So how do we get more transparency? Because clearly these things are going on.
You know how? Right here.
Right here on ThinkTech.
On ThinkTech.
Oh my God, we are so
So glad
self-serving.
you raised these issues. We have to continue to do that.
Yes. Okay, well.
Keep trucking,
We
Chris.
just keep trucking. Well, the thing is I actually had, when I see things like this, I kind of think to myself, okay, maybe we need to write a bill. Maybe we need to write a bill and say to the judiciary, we've got your hand in the cookie jar again. And maybe it's the legislature's
It's not
fault.
them. It's not them. It's the legislature. They had to, fashion a deal like this. It's a little arcane. The right way to be is just fund what they need. Why have a separate collection mechanism? Fund what they need.
So do we have a problem? We talked about this in the last show last week. We talked about, is there an incipient nature of bureaucracy to continue to try and grow itself?
Sure.
Is one of the reasons why the judiciary isn't getting the budget is because, like the rest of the bureaucracy in Hawaii, it tends to always try to make itself grow.
Yeah, it's not the judiciary,
It's
though.
mission
wouldn't put
creep.
this on the judiciary. I mean, they have to get the money to survive their agency. It's the legislature is not being sensitive. The legislature should give them, and for that matter, the governor should give them more money. That they need more money. They've been underfunded for a long time. I think that's been the case for many years.
Well, is this because of the control that the Democrats have had over the legislature for so many years?
I don't think it's political party. I think the legislature is simply not sensitive to these issues. And the money chairs would say to you, we don't have the money. And the answer is, well, you gotta have priorities, man. We live in the 21st century. Develop priorities, and how about the judiciary? That's a branch of government. How about giving them a priority? We live in times when arcane things happen, and if we had the right priorities, they wouldn't happen. It wouldn't be so likely to happen.
Well, we seem to have a lot of challenges in Hawaii with
Have you
things
checked
going
other
on
states
with
on this?
conflicts.
Could be happening.
You know, and I have not. I only uncovered this yesterday, and so when I got a chance, when I uncovered this, I just found something just rubbed me the wrong way about it. And so I thought, well, this is something we should talk about on the show, because clearly what needs to happen is this needs to be addressed at the legislative level, writing legislation that would remove this potential for, or at least the perception of a conflict of interest. It's not fair to the judiciary, and it's not right for the citizens of Hawaii.
Yeah, and if I can go back to the energy point and the barrel tax, if my representative voted for the barrel tax in the first place, if they all got together making this big kumbaya about clean energy, and then a year later they're diverting all the money out of that, I'm really offended by that.
There needs to be a rule that says if you divert the money, you don't get to pay. You can't force them to pay the tax. Maybe we need something like that.
I don't want to be there when you try that.
That could get messy. This has been a good show, Jay. Thank you for stepping in today and helping me. I really do appreciate it, and I think it was an interesting topic on both matters. I'm Chris Lethem. This is The Economy and You, and we'll see you again next week. Aloha.